understand what the argument is and what the flaw in the argument is, right? So we have got this bloke, this airline representative, right, who says that the percentage of delays caused by airline error has decreased significantly this year, right? So it's giving us a certain percentage, right? Percentage of flight delays caused by airline error, right? Now the representative says this indicates that airlines listen to complaints about preventable errors, which are mainly these flight delays caused by airline error, right? And address the problems, correct? And then his main conclusion, the main reason that he's writing the passage, is really captured by the last sentence, right? Which basically says that although delays caused by weather and other uncontrollable factors will always be part of the travel, preventable delays are clearly decreasing, right? So in effect, the author basically says, or the representative basically says, that the percentage of flight delays caused by airline error, this percentage has gone down, right? This percentage has decreased. That's stated as a fact, right? And from this, he's drawing the conclusion that the number of flight delays or the number of preventable delays, which is basically flight delays caused by airline error, that has decreased, right? And this is one of the reasons or one of the ideas that I would want you guys to take out of from this session, even if nothing else, that the GMAT verbal section is not really just a test of your English literacy skills, right? Of course, a certain level of English is required to understand the sentences, to understand the argument, and of course, the test is administered in English. But beyond that, it's really about logical thinking, right? So this is a very common line of reasoning that we misuse almost on a daily basis in our argumentation, right? For example, we might say, well, the percentage of unemployed people has decreased over the past year, right? And therefore, the number of unemployed people has also decreased, right? In other words, we basically have a tendency, an incorrect tendency, of mapping a percentage to an actual number, right? Or more adequately, mapping a percentage to the numerator of the percentage, right? Whereas a percentage is always going to be a fraction, right? It's going to comprise a numerator, sure, but it's also going to comprise a denominator, right? And most of us in our day-to-day lines of reasoning often tend to ignore the denominator, right? If we were to say that the percentage of unemployed people has decreased over the past year, and therefore the number of unemployed people has decreased, well, that is one possibility, right? For example, let's say earlier only 10% of the people were unemployed. Now that has decreased to, let's say, 5%, right? Now, assuming that the denominator remained the same in both instances, right? Let's say earlier there was a total of 100 people. Now also there is a total of 100 people, right? So then, of course, it makes sense to draw a conclusion on the numerator, right? The number of unemployed people would have decreased, right? But unless we know something about the denominator, right, we cannot really draw a conclusion on the numerator just on the basis of a percentage change, right? The author's flaw, therefore, when he says that the percentage has decreased, therefore the numerator has decreased, is really that he is not taking into account the denominator at all, right? Because it's not necessary that the numerator has to decrease for the percentage to decrease, right? एक और तरीका है through which the percentage could decrease without the numerator getting impacted in any way, shape, or form, right? And that is to do really with the denominator, right? For example, let's say earlier there were 100 people and 10 people were unemployed, right? So that's an unemployment rate of 10%, right? But now, for example, let's say the number or the total number of people who can actually apply to jobs, let's say that is 1,000, right? And in that case, even if the rate does decrease to a 5%, the actual numerator is still going to be greater, right? That is for a 5% unemployment rate. Now the numerator has actually increased, right? And therefore, the other way as to how the percentage could decrease overall without the numerator necessarily changing, right, is if the denominator increases significantly, right? So for example, the basic idea is that 10 upon 1000 is always going to be less than 10 upon 100, right? So the main gap or the main bridge that the author has to cross over here is he has to take into account the denominator. It should not be the case that the decrease is happening simply because of an increase in the denominator, right? And which option talks about the denominator? In this case, with regard to percentage of flight delays caused by airline error. So first of all, percentage of flight delays caused by airline error, what would be the numerator? The numerator would just be the actual number, right? That is the number of flight delays caused by airline error, right? What would be the denominator? Denominator would be the much bigger superset, right? So in formal logic or in critical reasoning logic, we have this idea of superset and subset, right? So here the superset would just be the total number of delays, right? And therefore, the thing that the author has overlooked is that the total number of delays could also have increased drastically, right? And that in turn could have led to the overall decrease in the percentage, right? The author says, well, the denominator has not changed, and it's only the numerator that has decreased from the fact that the percentage has decreased, right? And the denominator variable, which is the total number of delays and the fact or the possibility that the total number of delays could have increased, is only addressed by option D, right? Key delays caused by these weather and other uncontrollable factors could also have increased drastically during the year under discussion, right? And then if that is the case, then just on the basis of the percentage decreasing, we cannot really conclude that the numerator has necessarily decreased, right? Another way to sort of eliminate some of the options, and this is one of the key ideas in verbal, that it's always more elimination than selection, right? And one of the frameworks which we also talk about is the framework of comparison, right? So for example, here you've got a comparison between this year and something that happened over the previous time period, right? कि there was something new or something unique that occurred this year, right? जो कि पिछले सालों में नहीं हुआ था, right? So the correct answer choice should also talk about that idea, right? And this we cover in scope analysis and domain of an argument, कि how to identify the domain, right? So the domain of the argument is only limited to something unique that took place this year, right? And something unique that took place this year is also only addressed in option D, right? This year there could have been something different or something unique, right? Option E, which was the most commonly selected option, or even option A, doesn't work for the simple reason that E does not say that there was anything unique this year, right? That is, even if customers might not believe that the delays were caused by uncontrollable factors, still the point of the fact of the matter is the line of reasoning can still hold. The percentage decreased this year, therefore the numerator decreased, right? Because they would not have believed this even in the previous years, right? So option E does not really tell you anything about what was unique to this year, right? A comes much closer, but A again suffers from the same sort of gap that E does, right? Again, it does not talk about anything unique that took place this year, right? Had option A said something along the lines of, key airlines may have been motivated by financial concerns to underreport the percentage of flight delays this year caused by airline error, right? Had option A been stated in this manner, then even A could have been a correct option, right? In which case, of course, you wouldn't have option D, right? Because then option A basically would have said that they are just fabricating the data and ऐसा actual में नहीं हुआ है कि the percentage of flight delays has decreased. They are just motivated by money or finances to underreport the actual number of delays that occurred this year, right? And then A again would have pointed out ki what was so unique or what was so different this year as compared to the previous years, right? But the way that option A is phrased, the verb tense that is used in option A, does not say that they were motivated by financial concerns only this year, right? If option A is true, then, well, they may be motivated by financial concerns generally, in which case they would have been motivated last year, the year before that, and so on and so forth, right? Yet the actual percentage decline only took place this year, right? So on that basis alone, also, there has to be something unique or something different this year that took place. You could eliminate options A and E and land at option D, right? Another option which was selected was option C. So I'll just address that very quickly. Even if complaints may not be the most reliable measure of how many errors occurred in a given year, right? That has really got nothing to do with the argument of the representative, right? The argument of the representative is simply to do with the fact that whether the number of preventable delays, whether that number is decreasing or not, right? He says that the number is decreasing on the basis of this fact. The percentage has decreased, just as the percentage of unemployed people has decreased from 10 to 5. Therefore, fewer people are unemployed, right? True, if the denominator remains the same, absolutely, fewer people are unemployed, right? But what if the overall population of the town expands from 100 to 1000, right? Then in that case, even if the percentage decreases, it does not really mean that the numerator has declined. The denominator always has to be taken into account when dealing with percentage, proportion, ratio, fractions, all those sorts of entities. Clear on this, everyone? Any queries or doubts?
No, sir.
Yeah, really.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Excellent.
Yes.
Clear? Brilliant. Having fun so far in this question? Or did you have fun in this question? And see how tricky the verbal reasoning section is. A lot of you might think, okay, verbal reasoning is just a test of English. If my English is good, then I should be able to ace the verbal section, so on and so forth, right? But it is much more logically oriented than just that, right? Shall we look at a couple more questions? Yeah, good to hear that, Saksham. Yeah, should we look at two more questions? Again, official
Yes.
GMAT questions, right? Let's have a look at this one. Again, take a couple of minutes to have a read of the passage, right? So, Gia, what is the GMAT score for ISP? So, again, as Vaibhav would have mentioned, it's a combination of your profile and extracurriculars, academics, so on and so forth. But assuming that the rest of the stuff is, let's say, average or above average, you're looking at a score in the 94th percentile range, right? So that translates into a 685 on the GMAT Focus Edition, or it translated to a 720 on the classical GMAT, right? Vaibhav, would you like to add to that maybe? So,
Thank you, sir. Sure. So, I mean, Param sir captured it at most of its extent. Like you mentioned, it's a combination of your entire profile. So, let's say if a GMAT score is slightly less than the 94th percentile, maybe you can make up for it in some areas like extracurricular, like or like have a like a national award in some sport or anything. Like just like talking about basic examples, right? So of course, it's a combination of your entire profile. It's not just that GMAT would make or break for it, but
hmm.
again, there's no downside to a higher GMAT score. It would add a lot of value to your profile. I hope that answers your question, Tia.
All right. So, and Siddharth had also a question to ask us. Does having a job offer help in ISP YLP?
Right. So Siddharth, interesting question. Yes, it can help you because by the time, like especially for this year, by the time your interviews happen for YLP, I think most of you would be graduating and most of you would be having job offers in hand as well. Most of you may have started your job as well. So that definitely helps you because, of course, it adds a bit of credibility to your profile. Plus, it gives you a sense of direction as well. So let's say if you start working, let's say with the McKinsey, right? So you can tell ISB that okay, like post your MBA, you want post the ISB PGB program, you want to go towards this particular sector, and this is how I think my time at McKinsey would be helping me.
Hmm.
So that is how having a job offer can, help you in that regard. I hope that answers your question, Siddharth.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Vaibhav, for that. All right. So we have gotten, or we have started getting a few queries or a few responses to this question. Okay. So we have got responses from Mahiraj, from Daksh, from Aditya, not 100% sure, but 99%. Well, 99% is pretty good, surety. So then we have also got Saksham. Okay. Few more responses before we discuss this one. Again, this is a verbal reasoning question, which is not categorized at a 99 percentile difficulty as the previous question was, but this is also categorized at an 85 percentile difficulty, right? Simply because the options are much lengthier, right? And then you have to really analyze the options, again, eliminating them one by one, and then arriving at the correct answer. Okay, Ronak? Good. And that is indeed correct. So Ronak, Saksham, Aditya, Daksh, all of you are correct. Again, the thing is, the devil is really in the details, right? I mean, okay, so let's look at the argument because this one is very, very interesting. And quite often the confusion is really between D and E, right? The final two options, correct? So what is the overall argument? The overall argument is that we have got this corporation known as Haglet Corporation. That's irrelevant. And again, oftentimes, this is one of the things you should do. Whenever you're given a proper noun, just acronymize it to something, treat it as a black box and move on, right? The GMAT loves setting these sorts of distractors as part of their question text or as part of their passage. Distractors which really eat into your time because verbal section there is the greatest challenge of time, right? You have got 23 questions and 45 minutes to solve those questions, right? So that's under 2 minutes a question. And that includes 4 reading comp passages, accounting for 13 questions and 10 CR questions, right? So time management has to be absolutely spot on, but time management is really a byproduct of conceptual clarity, right? So what does the debater say? So this bloke says that the average amount of overtime per month work by an employee in the manufacturing division, again, pay attention to the domain or the scope, right? So we are talking about this employee in the manufacturing division. And then it says the average amount of overtime is 14 hours, right? Then it says most employees of the Haglet Corporation work in the manufacturing division. All right, so let's put numbers to it. Let's say in HC, we have got 100 people. Manufacturing division, let's say we have got 70 people, the majority. Then the author also goes on to say that the average amount of overtime per month generally does not fluctuate much from month to month, right? So it remains at a constant 14 hours, let's say. 14, maybe 15, maybe 12, so on and so forth. And then the conclusion is where the author makes a huge leap of faith, right? Therefore, and this is the sort of way in which they will trap you unless you're reading the argument carefully. Therefore, most employees of the corporation almost certainly work some overtime, right? So it's basically saying an analogy would be my average grade was 90. Therefore, I scored a 90 in every subject, right? And just because you're told what the average is of a certain set of entities, right? We cannot conclude that every entity has to have the same value as the average, right? Average अगर आपको दिया हुआ है and you know the number of elements, all you can really conclude is the sum of the elements in the set, right? For example, if you're told that the average of 5 elements is 90, all you can really conclude is that the sum of that set would be 90 cross 5, which is 450, right? And what the GMAT CR will try to do is that it will try to say that the average is a certain value, and then it will try to extend the argument into saying that therefore each element is the same value, right? But we must account for a disproportionate distribution of elements in the set, right? For example, this is one way as to how the average could turn out to be 90, but the average could also turn out to be 90, for instance, if, for example, somebody scored 100 in 4 of their units, right? And scored a 50, a lowly 50 in the final unit, right? And then in this case, for 4 of their units, they would have an HD grade, whereas for the final unit, they would have a grade of C or, whatever the corresponding equivalent is, right? And that's effectively what you're looking for in such question types based on the concept of average. Basically, you're looking for an option that says, because we have to weaken it, again, the argument is vulnerable to which of the following criticisms. And the main difference between D and E really is in terms of the quantifier, right? The author says that most employees work some overtime, that is this overtime of 14 hours, right? He is assuming that everybody has, the set value equal to 14, 14, 14, 14, right? To weaken it, the option should say that most employees probably do not work this kind of overtime, and maybe it's only 1 or 2 poor employees who are being forced to work all these extra hours, right? कि ऐसा हो सकता है 3 managers say, and you have got 2 low-level employees, and all the low-level employees have to put in the overtime, right? कि again, if the average of 5 workers is 14 hours of overtime, it's not crucial or it's not necessary that the set looks like this for the average to be 14, right? It could also be the case that maybe 2 employees are putting in 35 hours of overtime a week, and the 3 top-level managers are putting in no overtime, right? So that's another advantage of doing an MBA as a top-level manager. You probably can get by or get away without doing this overtime, right? And mainly the difference between D and E is the quantifier, right? D says it overlooks the possibility that even if there is a certain average worked by members of the group, many members may work no overtime at all. E is very, very similar to that even if most employees work some overtime, any one employee may work no overtime in some months, right? So between D and E, if the argument is that most employees work some overtime, which of the two do we think is a better weakener or a better flaw? That many members work no overtime or one member does not work overtime in some months? Assuming that the conclusion is that most employees work some overtime. So which of the two do we reckon would weaken it better? Absolutely, right? That is the option containing the quantifier many, right? The author says 9 out of 10 people work overtime of 14 hours. Option D says 9 out of 10 people do not work overtime, and it's only that one extra person जिसके ऊपर सारा काम आ जाता है, who works 70 hours of overtime, right? E is really second best, and this is what you'll experience quite a bit in CR and RC, and even in certain data insights questions that you will be stuck between the final two options. And this is where the details, that is the conceptual clarity, will bail you out, right? E is a possible weakener, but it's extremely mild, right? It's just talking about one employee, that too in some months, right? Whereas the conclusion is each month most employees work some overtime, right? So considering those sorts of quantifiers, D weakens it a whole lot more than does option E. Clear on this, everyone? Similarly, you could also eliminate option B, right? B is sort of the exact opposite to what you're looking for, right? B says कि even if a certain amount of overtime is worked by any employee of the corporation, then the same amount of overtime has to be worked by a manufacturing division employee. In fact, the flaw in the argument, if anything, is the exact opposite. The argument says कि if a manufacturing division guy goes 14 hours, then any employee in the corporation goes 14 hours, right? So Ronak, elimination is a pretty good way to proceed in such cases, right? The main mathematical flaw, and this is what CR is about, a whole collection of mathematical flaws, right? And critical reasoning frameworks. So the main framework over here is really the concept of average, right? And basically, this is what you will experience when you start learning CR properly, or that's how we teach it. There are these 7 or 8 frameworks. And for example, one of the frameworks is dedicated exclusively to the concept of average, right? And there are at least 8 or 10 high-level official questions that test on the exact same flaw. The author says the average is equal to X. Therefore, each element in the set is equal to X, right? And there, one of the main flaws will be we have to account for a disproportionate or an inordinate distribution of elements in the set, right? कि अगर average 14 है आपका, does not mean कि every element in the set is equal to 14. Could also be the case कि maybe the set comprises 10 elements and one element is 140, everything else is not, right? And this also is a skill that will be useful in data insights and quant, right? Testing for edge case values, for problem solving, for mathematical flaws, those sorts of things. Brilliant. Excellent. So that was great participation. Let's look at, absolutely, Roshan, the recording will be shared. It will be shared with everyone, and we'll share some other things as well, which Bhaumik will talk about later. Let's look at one final question of CR, right? Just to imbibe this idea, it's not just a test of the English language, right? Which is what, a lot of test takers have an initial misconception of. Resources for integrated reasoning questions, Muskan. So the official guide, the Focus Edition Data Insights book, right? Once you purchase the hard copy, then you get access to a code, and that in turn will give you access to 100+ IR questions, brand new IR questions. Apart from that, the Focus Edition mocks are also there, and they have entirely rebranded the mocks, right? So they are all new questions for the Focus Edition exclusively. So there are a total of 6 mocks available on the official website. Each of them can be taken at least once more, right? So that's a total of 12 mocks. And 12 mocks there are a total of at least 12 odd IR questions for the data insight section for every mock, right? So that's basically 12 cross 12, 144 there, 100 there from the official guide. Plus on GMAT Club also, you can look at a few official past edition IR questions. And then we also provide 15 mocks. So they also would account for about 300 more IR questions. So I would say a combination of those, because IR they didn't really change the questions over the past so many years, right? Because it wasn't part of the mark score when the GMAT used to be on a scale between 200 and 800, right? So they haven't released too much, but they have released enough so that the test takers can practice. So all in all, you'll be able to find about at least 500, I would say, IR questions. But that's, of course, still lower than what you have for quant and verbal, right? For quant and verbal, you'd have close to at least 7,000 odd questions for each section easily. So study schedule, Muskan, that's very, very unique to the student, really, right? So there isn't any generic one-size-fits-all study schedule, correct? Because it would depend upon other things, how much time you're able to devote to your prep, right? What sort of challenges you're facing in your prep, whether the challenge is in a basic concept or a more advanced concept. So you can connect with us later and we'll be able to guide you on that, right? But, there wouldn't be a generic response to that because, the same program can definitely not work for everybody. If, for example, you're at an advanced level, then you'd need a different study schedule. If you're, on the other hand, scoring, let's say, at a 615 or 625 in the marks, you'd need a different study schedule. Working professional, different study schedule. So there are a lot of branches, to that same document. So you can connect with us. We'll share with you our contact numbers a bit later in the presentation. And then we'll be more than happy to guide you on that. Cool. So Divya, we will respond to that query regarding Ivy Leagues, right? So we will respond to it at the end of the presentation once we have gone through the remaining part of the slides, right? So guys, any questions related to, let's say, admission consulting, college selection, let's say interviews for colleges, right? So let's maybe park them for the end, right? Once I have completed the GMAT preparation part of the presentation and once Bhaumik has presented our course schedule and the academic program, and then we'll have a dedicated 25 to 30-minute slot for just Q&A, right? So we have accounted for that as well. Cool. Any other responses to this one? Exam day, Ronak, there are no such procedures and policies. You need your passport, right? You can't take anything into your test cubicle, right? Passport and locker key are pretty much the only things that you can take to the cubicle where you'll be writing the test, right? To the test center, you can bring a bag which you need to keep in the locker, right? Plus, during the 10-minute break that you get, I suggest bringing some refreshments, something to drink maybe, because you can't really leave the test center, but you can always access your locker during the break. Cool. So now this question, let's discuss it a little bit. Again, this is categorized as a 99 percentile question, right? And this question belongs to the framework of causation correlation, right? And the overarching idea on the GMAT is, or informal logic is, that correlation does not entail causation, right? Just because you have got two events occurring together, that does not mean event one causes event two, right? And one of the most common lines of questioning in CR will be, the author will say X causes Y, and then the question would ask you to strengthen or weaken the argument, right? So this question asks you to strengthen the argument X causes Y, right? So whenever you get this sort of question, always map out the X and the Y, always isolate them. So here your X is orcas, your Y is the otter population decline, right? And we have to strengthen the idea that orcas were the cause of the otter population decline, right? Now, one of the ways to strengthen a causality-based argument, and there are multiple others, but one of the ways which you will see in the options is an option that basically goes something like this. Ki when the cause is not there, the effect is also not there, right? Because that adds a bit more credibility to the idea that X causes Y, right? For example, if you say asbestos causes cancer, right? So if it's a true causality, we would also expect कि अगर asbestos नहीं है, then the person would not contract cancer, right? Again, strengthen does not mean that we have to prove a 100% that asbestos causes cancer. It just means we have to make the argument a bit more credible, right? And again, there are standard templates and blueprints to how the answer would appear on the test day for a given framework, right? And therefore, once you have mastered the framework and once you have mastered the blueprint, then the correct option would almost jump out at you, right? So here, if you're looking for this framework, when the orcas are not there, right, that's what the cause is, then the otter population did not decline, right? That line of reasoning is really captured by one option pretty directly, right? And that is basically option C, right? Key when the area is inaccessible to orcas, right? Then you don't have any decline in the population of the sea otters, right? A lot of you have also selected, a lot of the participants have selected option A. A does not work because it simply does not tell you कि sea otter population decline कैसे हुआ, right? It talks about a consequence or of a result of the population decline, but what was the cause of the population decline is not really answered by option A, right? So again, once you organize the different questions into different frameworks and into different templates, then you will automatically know what a correct answer should look like as well, right? Now, let's talk a little bit more about the processes that take place as part of our courses. So this is how our real-time doubt solving works. You simply ask your queries over WhatsApp, as simple as that. And within an hour of your query, a mentor will respond to your query in detail, and it will be in detail, right? So we have got mentors who are present in different time zones. So at any point in time, you will have at least one active trainer on the crew, right? And in fact, in the last 2 months alone, we have responded to over 4,700 queries, right? So that's basically 4,700 messages comprised across both quant, verbal, data insights, and across different batches, right? And again, as just to harp on this point again, our courses are valid for a lifetime, and at absolutely no additional charge can you choose to access the recordings, re-enroll in a new batch, no additional cost. Ask as many doubts as you want till your doubts are sorted, right? And this is what I mean by real-time doubt solving, that it's almost really real-time, right? If somebody would ask a query at 11:25 and I would respond at 11:26, right? And not only me, but some of the other peers and mentors would also respond to those queries, right? If somebody posts at 11:32 or somebody posts at 11:41 and I respond at 11:42, right? And also the environment that we have got, it's a very, very collaborative, cooperation-based sort of environment that we have set up, right? The goal is genuinely to help you get a good score, right? So even our peers or your other students, right, are extremely motivated to respond to the queries, right? Well, they might be delayed by 2 or 3 minutes, but again, they respond in pretty good detail, right? And it's not just, a one line key A is the answer because C is incorrect, right? So it's much more in detail that we go through. And really the focus is on conceptual clarity, right? And again, not only for verbal, also for quant, right? Again, the same process is what we have inculcated. And the same process has given us astounding results, right? 60% of our test takers, again, reported more than the 90th percentile on the GMAT, right? And again, matlab, I am active pretty much from 11 o'clock through 2 o'clock in the morning, right? 11 o'clock in the morning through 2 o'clock at night, right? And then some other times, some other mentors would be available. But again, the main idea is that people text me even at 10:30 or 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm always there for my students, right? So the goal really is absolute conceptual clarification or even स्ट्रैटेजी बेस्ड डिस्कशंस, राइट? कि मान लो आपका कॉन्सेप्ट्स क्लियर है बट आप अप्लाई नहीं कर पा रहे हो टेस्ट में, टाइम मैनेजमेंट में कोई इशू है, तो वी आर ऑलवेज मोर देन हैप्पी, मी, गौरव, भौमिक, वैभव, वी आर ऑलवेज मोर देन हैप्पी to get on a chat with you and identify and diagnose those flaws, right? The goal is really to help you succeed. So I'll talk just a little bit about the content overview. So our courses also come equipped with a student portal, right? So you don't have to study from multiple sources. You have got a unique, dedicated, integrated portal through which you can access the recordings, assignments, official guides, and other reading materials. Every class has got some pre-class associated with it, either in the form of a video or in the form of a pre-read. And of course, after the class, we also have post-class assignments, which basically test you on your understanding of the concepts learned in the session, right? And in addition to that, we also conduct webinars with GMAT folks, right? So if you have visited my YouTube channel, for example, you'd have seen that last year we conducted 2 webinars with Seema Parakat, who was the general manager, associate outreach general manager at GMAC, to talk about the upcoming changes to GMAT focus. At that time, it was still upcoming, right? Then we also have webinars with our success stories, right? So full interviews with students who cracked the 750, 760, those are all available on GMAT30.com. And of course, the portal can also be accessed on 2 devices. So we limit access to 2 devices, 1 laptop, 1 mobile, right? But again, you can pretty much study on the go, right? And just to illustrate a little bit more on how helpful, for instance, our life doubt solving process is, and then I'll hand it over to Bhaumik, right, to talk about the academic program aspect of the course. So we can just listen to a short 1-minute part of the testimonial from Tushar, who was our student who appeared for the GMAT for the first time with us, prepared for 3.5 months, and cracked a 750, right? So I won't play the full testimonial because it's a 4-minute long thing, but I'll just play 1 minute in which he talks about our life doubt solving process and what his experience
Apart from that,
was.
during the classes, I was active. I was asking questions very actively because I was, that's the kind of person I am. But both Gaurav sir and Param sir took my doubts very actively during classes. I often remember times when Param sir would used to extend classes by even half an hour at times to solve the doubts that we had. And beyond the classes, he used to give us problem sets, practice sets to sort of practice, from GMAT Club, so something very accessible that way. And it was all based on where we were trading. So if we used to get done with the practice sets quickly, we used to get more of them, and I think beyond the classes, the questions that we used to come up with, any sort of doubts during the classes, used to get solved very rapidly. I often remember a small 1 or 2 line doubt for a particular question, which used to be responded by maybe almost 2 scrolls of WhatsApp chats until the point that the question is completely clear to us or the concept is absolutely clear to us, the students. So I absolutely commend GMAT30 and Param sir